Good afternoon, my name is Luka Krajnc, and over the next 10 minutes I will present some partial results from the ongoing research on wood increment and wood density in different beech provenances. The sampling for this research took place in a beech provenance trial in Slovenia, part of a Europe-wide network of provenance trials set up by the UFRO organization in the 90s. The trial has been planted 23 years ago and sampled a year ago, so in September 2019. Not all provenances were sampled from the trial. A subset of 6 were chosen based on their time of flushing. A third were flushing early, a third were late, and a third were flushing somewhere in between. 3 of the 6 originated in Slovenia and the rest from elsewhere in Europe. trees were selected at random in each provenance and used for wood density assessment, while a subsample of 11 trees were selected for increment analysis. The diameters are displayed in the picture on this slide, and you can see that although there are some differences in diameters between the different provenances, they are not notable or not significantly different anyway. The wood density was sampled using a resistance drilling device, which measures resistance when drilling into a standing tree. Normally this is done perpendicularly to the tree, and the needle is 1.5 millimeters wide in diameter. Each measurement is recorded electronically, exported, and can then be further analyzed in any software you'd like. An example of a resistance drilling measurement is shown here on this paper. And you can see that it correlates quite well to the increment core above. Each of those tiny waves represents a transition between late and early wood. Just to be clear, this was a Douglas fir increment core, this is not beech. In beech, things are a little bit more complicated. This is an example of the measurement that is then exported to the computer. The drilling needle entered the tree on the left side of the image and exited on the right. The smaller image shows a zoomed in radial profile. Again, this is just for clarity, this is Douglas fir. The resistance drilling values are not directly values of wood density. They need to be converted first. This is normally done by multiplying the resistance drilling values by a conversion factor. That factor is determined on freshly cut stem discs, which are drilled immediately after felling using the Resistograph device, and then their wood density was measured. So their volume, their weight, and then they were dried in order to determine the basic wood density. The ratio between the drilled values and the actual density is then used to convert the rest of the data into basic wood density. In our case, this was 1.45. The increment cores were extracted at breast height using a Pressler increment borer. They were then dried, glued into holders, sanded and scanned, and their treating widths were measured using the Q-Recorder software made in Sweden. First, let's look at the results of comparing wood density between the different provenances. This image shows a median wood density. Median was chosen because it's more representative of the overall tree density than using arithmetic mean, because the means are more sensitive to any branches or ingrown anomalies that would be in the path of the resistance drilling. Although there are some differences between provenances, the differences here are not statistically significant. In general, the Idria provenance has slightly higher values, while the lowest values were found in the provenance from Belgium and Postojna Javorniki. When looking at minimum wood density of each tree, when comparing them across different provenances, there are even smaller differences between them, which would indicate that the minimum wood density is not directly controlled or affected by genetics. On the other hand, the differences in wood density in maximum tree wood density are more pronounced and are even statistically significant here. So the Idria provenance had the highest maximum wood densities from the 6 provenances, and this would need to be examined further. Whether this is due to wood anatomy, whether it's due to some other unknown factor at this time, this needs to be studied further before we make any definite conclusions. So as part of this studying, we also looked at wood increment. In general, in softwoods and in ring porous hardwoods, the ring widths correlate quite well with wood density because they are directly correlated with the late wood percentage. However, in diffuse porous species such as beech, this correlation is not as good. This figure represents the ring widths of the 6 provenances over the next decade. Please bear in mind that this still can be considered juvenile wood. So they are not necessarily, these results are not necessarily representative of what would happen if you were to compare mature trees. However, even from this image you can see that there are considerable differences between the provenances, sometimes even up to a factor of 2. There are notable differences, and these differences remain relatively constant. The order of the provenances doesn't change. For example, when comparing a year with the drought, which was 2017, to a relatively good year in 2018, the order of the provenances between them remains similar, even though that the maximum is almost twice as in 2018 as it was in 2017. This could indicate that radial growth in beech is somewhat under genetic control. However, this could only be established by looking at wood anatomy data. To conclude, the differences between wood increment and wood density are partly expected. However, both properties are directly related to wood anatomy, and this link would need to be explored further to draw any final conclusions. The samples are already being analyzed, and the results should be published sometime in the next year. Another provenance trial will also be included, where the properties of the same provenances will be measured in different growing conditions. The samples for this were already collected from a sister provenance trial in Hungary and will be included in the analysis. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, let me know.